What's up, hikers? Welcome back here to the channel. We got a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to be talking about the Winter 4-State Challenge that me and Viking just got done. A t-shirt's going to be dropping here soon on the channel. A bunch of questions about the Appalachian Trail and the John Muir Trail and which trail I like better of the two. That and more, so don't go away. All right, now just before we get into the video, I want to show you my stellar setup that I have going on here in my studio, aka hotel room. Look at this. I can see you right there. Yep, that's you. Anyway, look at this. Wow. Ooh. Winter 4-State Challenge. Viking and I completed it this last weekend. We got done at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Total success. Took us 18 hours and 40 minutes or so. We started at 7 p.m. at night and got done at 2 p.m. 12 of the hours were done on the overnight. So that was probably the most challenging part of the entire hike. It was fun. We had a blast. We laughed the entire time. And I think there's going to be other things that we're going to do and partner with here in the future on our channel and his channel. Now, about an hour before we got kicked out of our hotel room, we did a really spontaneous Q&A. Check it out here. We cover actually quite a few questions. Great questions, not just about the challenge, but about the Appalachian Trail, about the John Muir Trail, and a bunch of other things. Now, if you're not following Viking from Between the Blazes, make sure you do. Get over to his channel. He's hysterical. He's got a lot of great content. And again, you're going to see us partner up together here down the future. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're winding up the end of the month, and we have 2 gear giveaways coming up. We actually are doing the Patreon gear giveaway here this evening on Thursday, the 22nd. And then next week, I'm going to be doing another gearbox giveaway. There are going to be details on how you can get your free entry into that gear giveaway in a newsletter that I'll be sending out here this weekend. Now, if you're not signed up for our newsletter, you got to go over to my website, followbigfoot.com, and make sure you sign up and subscribe. And there's pieces of news that I might not share here on the channel that you're only going to get in that newsletter, so make sure you check it out. Speaking of my website, there's a small problem. I went over today and saw this. There was a mix-up with the payment, and they have to do like this refund and long story. Anyway, it's going to be down for the next 24 to 48 hours, so if you're not on my newsletter and you can't get on my website right now because it's still not up, come back in the next day or so and it should be up. Next month, I am going to sell my very first t-shirt design. Pitched this idea to Bonfire of the design, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. I think you're going to love it. I'm going to share the design in the newsletter this weekend, but look for that to come in March. Million Step Challenge. We have 4 more people that joined the elite status of Million Steppers here, and that puts us at 13 total people. This week we had Michelle Anderson, Patrick Shorts, Brian Altzer, and Larry Elliott all join this elite class, and we have about a dozen more people that are going to hit their million steps sometime in like the next 7 to 10 days. You guys rock. Let's move into the Q&A. I submitted my JMT permit application 4 days ago, and I've been denied each day. I know there are 17 more days on the application to receive a permit, but am wondering your opinion. How late in the season is too late to start the trail? All right, Alan, I know I already answered your question in the comments, but a lot of people out there have been reaching out to me. They're in the lottery process right now, so this is a great question I think a lot of people have. Last year with the snow in the Sierra, I think it kind of really made people wary of doing an early through hike of the JMT. So I think a lot of people are trying to get permits later on in the season just to try to avoid maybe what happened last year. A ranger last year told me that they were getting as many as 1,000 permits a day for the September dates. About the middle of September is when things start shutting down. Last year, because of the snow, some places actually stayed open later, like VVR. They opened until I think October 3rd or 4th. Normally they shut down somewhere in the middle to late September, but they wanted to be open a little bit later just because of their season was so much shorter. Most people are going to want to be able to get on the trail no later than about the early 2nd week of September. If you get in past the middle of September, you're going to have issues trying to resupply at certain places. MTR is probably going to close down right around the middle of September. You can still pick up your resupply all the way till about the end of September. I think last year was September 27th. The later in the season, the less opportunities that you have for resupplying at the actual on-trail resupply points, which would be Reds Meadow, VVR, MTR. If you get on the trail by the first week of September, you should be in good shape. How do you deal with pitching a non-freestanding tent in areas where ground is too hard or rocky for stakes? Well, in terrain like this, you actually can use rocks and logs as tie downs. You basically will take your guy lines and you'll tie them to the rock or the log. And then what you'll do is once you have it affixed, you'll pull it till your non-freestanding tent is nice and taut and proper, and you should be good to go. Another condition that you might see on the trail is if you're in an area that just has a ton of loose rock and loose sand, what you can do is you can take your stake, tie the guy line to your stake, and then bury your stake. It actually acts as an anchor. When I'm camping with my duplex, I always bring a couple of V-stakes that I use to anchor my 2 trekking poles down on the duplex. And those V-stakes have holes all the way through the entire stake, and you could find any part of it. I'd tie it somewhere in the middle and then bury that sucker down deep. You should be able to hold like a champ. Did you find it was difficult using non-standalone tent on the JMT hike? Are there parts of the trail where you had to tie the tent cords to rocks, or were you able to always find soft ground for the stakes? I actually had no difficulty at all setting up my duplex the entire time on the JMT. Only one time did I have to get a little creative and tie it down, and that was because I was on a rock slab that was overlooking just a great vantage point out to the east, and it was actually very early in my through hike. It was a non-traditional campsite. It was kind of this hidden sort of campsite that was on this rock slab I don't think a lot of people knew about. It was maybe 2 or 3 tenths of a mile before sunrise camp. Outside of that though, absolutely no problems whatsoever. Do tents with smaller footprint than the duplex open up better opportunity for sites, either public or stealth? How often while out on a trail do you wish you had a smaller tent footprint? So with the duplex, you have all of the space inside the tent itself, but the downfall to it, you do need some real estate to be able to pitch your duplex. Now, did I ever wish I had a smaller footprint on the trail? There was a time on my AT through hike when I was in Vermont that I had a really difficult time trying to find a place to be able to pitch my tent. Actually, it was only really one specific night that I can recall. I don't remember exactly which part of Vermont that I was in. I could not find a small enough campsite for the life of me. I had to just get really creative with where I pitched my duplex. And what I typically would do is about an hour before I wanted to set up camp, I would start looking for campsites. And there are sometimes if I found a really good site, I would just set up camp there. But that's one of the things that does come with the duplex. You have this really great real estate inside the tent, but you do have to make sure that you have the real estate to be able to pitch the tent. So smaller footprints are gonna give you more opportunities, but I'd be careful how small that you get. Most hikers that I talked to that had 1-person tents regretted having it and wanted a 2-person tent just to have that little extra leg room. I tell you, for as much time that you're gonna spend out there on the trail in your tent, the tent is your house. It's worth it. We have a couple questions that are very similar. One talks about recommendations of watches with an altimeter that aren't going to break the bank. And then the other question talks about different watches that have altitude on them and just kind of talking about them. I think where it breaks the bank is when you want that GPS feature inside of your watch. That's what I went with. That's what I wanted. When you take that out though, you can get some pretty reasonable watches out there. I think a good brand to go with that a lot of hikers like is Casio. I know one of the watches that I was looking at getting is something that Redbeard recommended, which is one of the Casio watches that has a solar power function on the Casio watch. So not only do you got your altimeter, but you don't have to ever worry about putting batteries and replacing the batteries. I don't remember what the names of the models are. I'm going to put them in the links below. That's what I would recommend, and save yourself a few $100. If you could only hike either the JMT again or your choice of any 200-mile section of the AT, which would you choose? And what is a 200-mile section of the AT that you would choose even if you would choose the JMT over it? Also, the best 30-mile section of the AT, the best day hike of the AT. JMT or any 200-mile section of the AT, I would go with JMT. If I chose any 200-mile section of the AT, I would go back and I would do the White Mountains again, all the way through the Mahoosucs. I don't know exactly what the mileage is for that, but that was some of the most beautiful trail on the entire Appalachian Trail. Now, having said that, there was a couple of guys that I ran into at one of the shelters in Vermont, and those guys were section hiking in both Massachusetts and Vermont. There was about 10 of us there at the shelter, and when they mentioned the sections that they were doing, I remember every single person in the shelter that was through hiking, going northbound, all told them that that was an amazing section. Like, if we could think of a section up through Vermont, that was the 2-state section that we would do. Vermont and Massachusetts were amazing. I remember them being really beautiful. You finally start to be able to get and see some really great views again after going through the mid-Atlantic states, and it wasn't overly hard. So if you're looking for a really good section hike, Vermont and Massachusetts were pretty good. Now in terms of 30-mile sections of the AT, there are so many great small sections. It's honestly really hard to be able to like pick one and go off of that one. So throwing out the White Mountains and the main section of the trail that I said I would do the 200 miles in. But one part of the trail that you probably don't hear a lot of people talk about that I thought was actually pretty cool was the stretch of trail from Salisbury, Connecticut, all the way to Great Barrington and somewhere in that area. I think it might even be a little bit less than 30 miles. It might be 25 miles. But you go over Bear Mountain, which I did at night. I was doing the Connecticut State Challenge and was absolutely incredible. It's actually probably one of the most special moments on the AT that I had, just because of the views, the stars, and just the experience. You go up to Mount Everett, and right before Mount Everett, I remember seeing some of the best views that we've seen in probably 1,000 miles on the AT when we're starting to finally get back into the real mountains again. And there was a nice steep climb on Mount Everett heading up to the top of Everett. And I remember that being really inspiring. I was just really excited to be back in the mountains again. So that's another probably stretch of the trail that I thought was pretty cool. Do you have any desire to be an Adirondacks 46er? Yes, I think that would be really, really cool. I would love to be able to accomplish that someday. So I probably need a lot more time than I have right now, but I hope that works out in the deck of cards. Well, that wraps up our questions for this week's Q&A. If you have a question for next week's Q&A, make sure you put it in the comments below, or you can also email your question to followbigfoot@yahoo.com. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, do that right now. It takes one click of the finger, and also sign up for that newsletter. You got to get that entry, your free entry, into the Gearbox giveaway next week. You'll also find out about that t-shirt design that I'll be selling near March. So stay tuned for that and a whole lot more. And remember to follow Bigfoot.